Humanity seems to be hardwired for hierarchy. And I don't just mean that in the Petersonian way, but there's certainly that. That's the source of the Jordan Peterson lobster meme. Peterson pointed out that when two lobsters engage in a dominance dispute, the loser deflates and the winner puffs himself out. A brain mechanism in both lobsters helps make more serotonin available to the winner of the dispute, and less serotonin available to the loser. To make his point, he references a 1997 study where serotonin was injected into the subordinate, freely moving lobster, meaning that the lobster was a recent loser of a dominance dispute, but not so wounded from the encounter that he couldn't fight again. The injection of the serotonin resulted in a renewed willingness on behalf of the subordinate lobsters to engage the dominant lobsters in further agonistic encounters, but did not actually change who initiated the encounter, how they fought, how quickly the fight escalated, or who ultimately won. In other words, the serotonin did not increase the lobster's ability to fight, only his willingness to. It took the edge off the bruised ego from the last encounter, basically. And Peterson's argument is that even though humanity diverged from lobsters evolutionarily 350 million years ago, serotonin plays the same role in humans as it does in lobsters, and in many other animals too. When humans win or lose in a dominance dispute, serotonin goes up or down. There you go. I've just given you Jordan Peterson's argument using the original research. If you ever have to talk to somebody who hates hearing the name Jordan Peterson, just show him this study instead. But Peterson's way of looking at the topic is pretty simple, presumably because whenever we've heard his stuff, it's been in a YouTube video of one of his lectures where he's giving information that is sufficiently low resolution enough to get the idea across to a large crowd of people of varying backgrounds. So let's dig into it a little bit more. A lot of leftist thought revolves around the abolition of hierarchy due to it being a source of oppression. Marx's communism was envisioned as a moneyless, stateless, classless society, a society without hierarchy. Anarchism also aims towards statelessness and classlessness. The market socialists view a large part of the hierarchies found in employment to be unjust, especially where private owners are at the top. Even the authoritarian socialists like to appeal to the abolition of hierarchy in their rhetoric, though they never actually do it in practice. Of course, none of them actually do it in practice. The idea of abolishing the concept of hierarchy in a species which has a serotonergic system in their brains to keep track of relative status among others is a fool's errand. It will never happen, and those attempts to do it are, in fact, bad for us. But that doesn't mean that we're just cogs in the machine slotting into our proper place either. That's the fascist view on hierarchy. The fascist idea of corporatism was not rule by private corporation as we understand it today. It was the idea that the corporative state would be one in which the economy was managed by representatives of employers, workers, and the party, and the state would direct production to ensure that it remains in the national interest. The fascists wanted to achieve a rational ordering of society through social control of the means of production, just like the Marxists. But where the Marxists wanted it achieved through worker control of the means of production and the abolishment of social classes, fascists wanted it achieved by incorporating all people and property, all public and private, all proletariat and bourgeoisie into the state itself. Everybody had their place in the state hierarchy, and when everybody took their place, the fascist utopia would be achieved, according to their theory anyway. After fascism was gone, this tendency would be called class collaborationism by the Marxists. For humans, hierarchy certainly exists. We cannot do away with it as the Marxists would like. We also can't exist in perpetuity in an unchanging, purely authoritarian hierarchy as the fascists would like. The Marxists are wrong in being anti-hierarchy, but the fascists are wrong in believing that hierarchy should be immutable. What they're both missing is the fact that almost all of life's pains and pleasures come down to movement within a hierarchy. What motivates you at any given moment is moving through some hierarchy. What entertains you is watching others move through hierarchy too, and that doesn't necessarily mean moving upward in perpetuity. Why is watching your sports team win a game exhilarating? Because we're watching the winners increase in status relative to the losers. Why is watching a comedian who depreciates himself in front of his audience funny? Because we're watching the comedian decrease in status for our entertainment. Why is watching a person who acts like he's a 10 out of 10, but obviously isn't, strike out spectacularly with a woman so cringe-inducing? Because he believes he's at one level of status, but he's actually at another. Why is it that we want to watch a swaggering bully fall down the stairs, but not a 90-year-old grandma who can barely walk? Because the former is perceived as a justified reduction of status, while the latter feels like life picking on somebody who's already low status. And hey, if you're one of those lib-left progressive types who is all sex-positive and kinky, but still thinks hierarchy should be abolished, why do you like to be dominant or be dominated in bed? It's status. It's enjoying your position in the sexual hierarchy of your relationship relative to your partner. There's no BDSM without hierarchy. Our relationship with property is also a sign of hierarchy. We are also hardwired to privilege our own stuff over other people's. Think of how you sit on your own couch when you're relaxing versus how you sit on your friend's couch when you're going over for a visit. How familiar do you feel in your own home versus somebody else's? I bet you could describe every square meter of your place to me in detail, from that one minor stain on the carpet that nobody notices to that weird object on your desk. But if you had to explain your friend's place to me, it would likely only be in broad strokes. Color of the walls or general locations of the furniture. None of this stuff really needs to be taught to us either. Sure, there's differences between each culture that needs to be figured out, but the framework those differences sit atop of is biological. We generally know how to act towards higher and lower status individuals based on whether or not we want to defer to them or confront them. You wouldn't ask a restaurant manager for your bill the same way that you'd ask him for a job. When meeting a new person, the common icebreaker question of "what do you do?" is meant, at least in part, to be a way to figure out status. Not in some medieval sense where the farmer should not dare speak to the king, but there's certainly a feeling out of how you want to be treated, and how you should treat the other person in return. It's why you might feel nervous after engaging in random conversation with somebody you've never met at the office party, only to be later told that it's the company VP, somebody 50 ranks above you that you've never met. It's also why, when you have an unorthodox job, people suddenly don't quite know how to treat you. Now, even though high-status individuals are climbing hierarchies, releasing more serotonin, feeling better about themselves, and even living longer, that doesn't mean that it's good to be high status all the time. It's actually not. In the student-teacher hierarchy, the student is lower status, but actually stands to benefit more from their interaction. An attitude and posture of low status is helpful when attempting to apologize to somebody. That's why all of those celebrity apologies seem fake, no matter how hard they try. We view them as so high status that their apologies naturally feel insincere, even as they lose status right before our very eyes. The lobster who loses the dominance dispute might be low on serotonin, but he didn't die during the fight, and sometimes living to fight another day is more important than winning right now. So even though high status in a hierarchy is preferable, there's still utility in being low status. And moving up a hierarchy generates feelings of meaning, while watching others move in either direction in a hierarchy generates pleasure of all types. Clearly, we cannot just do away with hierarchy, nor can we exist in hierarchies that are too rigid. A dominance hierarchy is one where positions in the hierarchy are, for the most part, immutable. Everybody slots into their rightful place, and it's extremely hard to move up or down. Oftentimes, positions are determined by birthright, and if there's movement between them, it's due to brute force. Prestige in a dominance hierarchy, therefore, is based on naked power. To contrast, a competence hierarchy is one where positions are malleable. Promotions within the hierarchy are based on skill. Prestige in competence hierarchies is awarded voluntarily by those who are above you, and it's expected for you to do the same for those below. A competence hierarchy is meritocratic. So, I'm going to pose a question to you. How does somebody with no skill compete in a competence hierarchy? Well, there seems to be two ways. The first way is through hard work. Learning skills is hard, it takes time and effort, but you can rise through the ranks based on your own merits given enough time. This method of setting up a hierarchy is the most compatible with the liberal form of government, and most centrists, center-left, center-right, non-extremists, grillists thrive within it. The second way is to corrupt a competence hierarchy into a dominance one. Those people who advocate for the abolishment of hierarchies end up doing this as well, since it's, impossible. If you're somebody who's unskilled, but good at violence and extortion, a good strategy for climbing a competence hierarchy is to corrupt it. If you hear somebody saying that meritocracy isn't real, or it's a tool of the enemy, and we should be empowering people based on immutable characteristics, they're trying to subvert a competence hierarchy. If you hear somebody talking about how it's important to normalize political violence in order to enact their social change, how there's no middle ground, you're either with us or against us, they're also trying to subvert a competence hierarchy. This applies equally to the right and the left, and the collectivists, authoritarians, and radicals from both sides see the competence hierarchy as fertile ground for subversion towards their cause. The left sees no difference between competence hierarchies and dominance hierarchies, and rejects them both on that same faulty premise. The right abuses humanity's natural proclivity towards hierarchies to try and set up hierarchies of dominance. Resist them both, simple as. We need hierarchy. We're hardwired to want them, and to derive both pleasure and meaning from our position in them. But we've also got an obligation to keep our eyes open, to oppose the corrupting elements that creep into them. The only valid hierarchy is competence, as it's maintained through respect, consent, and humility. All others require treachery, violence, and caste, and their advocates are more than willing to impose that on you. Alright my friends, thanks for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed it. As always, streaming again tonight on twitch.tv/gameboomers. It's going to be more American McGee's Alice, because, Halloween. So make sure you drop by, hopefully I'll see you there. Have a good one, I love you.
you're saying that we should organize our societies along the lines of the lobsters.
Why not?